Good afternoon, welcome back. I don't know what you are expecting, but this is
not the usual topic. It's a good oral presentation, and clearly, some of us have to do a lot of this. Especially in the academic profession, we have to talk all the time. We have to talk for a living, literally. We have to talk to patients, patient relatives. We have to talk to MBBS students, undergraduate students, MD students, DM students. There are master students, PhD students. So at the end of the day, it would be unusual if you haven't had to talk to someone, teach someone in the regular working day. And add to that all the conferences you attend, the presentations you have to make for research, for your own research, for introducing others' research and all that. And many of us end up doing at least 2 or 3 oral presentations in a week. And this is the path that many of you will be going down a few years down the line if you are already not on that path. So it's important to know how to make a good oral presentation. And I'm not particularly well qualified for this, if you ask me. I think Madam must have called a few people and right. So you're not scraping the bottom of the barrel here. Right. So I
will, so that's my disclaimer that I'm not sorry. Is it connected? Anyway, my disclaimer is that although I'm not a particularly good presenter, I'm a much improved presenter than I was maybe a decade ago. So some of us have to learn it the hard way. We have to read up about how to present well. We have to practice a lot before we become good presenters. There are some people who are really good at this naturally, like they walk on stage like they're Rajnikant and people can't take their eyes off them. I'm definitely not one of them. So I can give you some tips about how to make better oral presentations, partly from personal experience because I've had to learn it the hard way. So these are really subjective tips, okay? So this is not a formal introduction to how to make slides or what content goes on them. I leave that part to you. These are very subjective tips. Content, in an ideal world, the content should be everything that matters on your slide. We are, for the most part, we are doing scientific presentations. And as far as scientific presentations are concerned, the scientific content on the slide should be what matters. But you probably know that there is a crisis going on in science about communication. The problem is that we do a lot of research, some of them pretty hi-fi research, but those things don't get communicated to people clearly. And people are still following some advice they can find on YouTube. People are buying enema kits from gurus selling it. You know, they believe in the stuff that they see somewhere else. So clearly someone else is communicating that to people better than the doctors are communicating to people, right? So it's partly our fault. It's not that we don't do research or that the quality of research is bad. It's just that sometimes what we do does not get communicated to people properly. So this is important for all of us. Content should be the most important part. And a few years ago, Bill Gates said that in an essay he wrote that content is king. And this is true. The most important part of your presentation is, of course, the scientific content. I put this picture in thinking that I'll talk about good slides with bad content being like putting lipstick on a pig. And then realized that the pig actually looks quite cute, this one. So, wrong analogy there. This pig doesn't need any lipstick. So you can have really good slides, but if your content is bad, it is literally like putting lipstick on a mummy or something, right? You can't beautify it and get away with bad content, right? So for that, you have to know your material. This comes easily to us because we usually know our material. It's just that sometimes we don't go over our slides very well, and you sometimes see even expert presenters tripping up when they are asked a question because they are not sure what was on the slides. So they go back a few slides, go forth. They have to, during the discussion stage, you often see that they trip up. So the number one message would be not that you should be familiar with your with your science alone. You should be familiar with your work, your research, and the content. You should be a subject expert on what you're talking about. But you also should be familiar with what's on your slides. And at least as far as I'm concerned, I would really like to know what I can take away from this. This might be a conclusion. This may be some take-home messages at the end. This may be a recap of what you are presenting. But you know what they say about teaching, right? First, you have to tell people what you're going to teach about. Then you have to teach them. And at the end, you have to tell them what you just taught them. This is how teaching works. So this is a 3-stage process. So the same way, at the end of the talk, if you can recollect to them, and it's quite possible that some people slept through your talk and woke up towards the end and would like to know what you talked about. That happens too. So it's always good to recap what you just spoke about. Second thing is really, really important, stick to time limits, right? If you have a 20-minute talk, don't go armed with 106 slides. And I have seen that happen, right? On average, a slide takes 1 minute if you really want to discuss something on the slide. If you have a table on the slide and you want to highlight some of your important findings, it will take you a minute. At the very least, say 30 seconds. So if you have a 20 minutes presentation, I would say 20 or 30 slides is the max you can cover and still make sense to people. And that's not counting the thank you slide or the intro slide, but the content slides should not be more than 20 or 30. So you should really try to stick to time limits because people respect that, and it's disrespectful to the next presenter if you delay things. The right way to do this is rehearse, but most of us are busy and you may not have time, but you should still try to rehearse if possible. And you would be surprised at how many people don't do that. And you can count as a rule of thumb that it will take 1 minute per slide. It's always good to know what is expected. We have right now presentations going on for Research Day in JIPMER, and a few of them actually called to find out how is the marking done, because they know what they want on their slides. So this is the markings part of this screenshot is from the marking scheme that's being used for today's presentations for PhD students. And it says practical or clinical relevance is 10 marks, novelty and rationale is 10 marks, methodology is 10 marks, and so on. For many conferences, you may know this already, or if you ask them, they'll tell you. So you can make your slides according to that, because you know what the judges are looking for. It is a very simple way to get your slides to be more effective. Ask and find out, if you can, what is expected of you, what they expect from your slides, from your presentation. Now this is the second part. This is in some ways, the tougher part. The science you are familiar with, you are experts in it. Communication is something that does not come naturally to us, to many of us, to some of us maybe, but it doesn't come very naturally to many of us. This is what we need some work on. So actually, a significant proportion of my slides are about communication. When you make slides, and this has been an ongoing controversy in science, in general we say the less on the slides, the better. But we are scientists, we need to put data on the slides, we need to show people information. If you are taking a lecture, you need to show some content to the students, yes or no? Yes, right? We need to have some content on the slides. We can't have ultra minimalistic slides and just talk about everything. But you have some things in your control. You are in control of how you present the content. So, for instance, you see many slides with entire paragraphs written on them. Does anybody think that's okay? That's a terrible way to use PowerPoint, because people will be reading at the slides, they won't be looking at you. So the best way to communicate is to talk to people directly. And that is traditionally how we communicate. We look people in the eye when we speak with them, right? Isn't that how we speak to people? We look at them in the eye and speak with them. But if you look away and speak, people lose interest. If you read from your slides, that's terrible. If others read from, if others read from the slides, that's bad, right? We should not be doing that. You still are in control of how you present your slides. You can have content on the slides, but still make it look simple and communicative. This is we have presentations. I work in neonatology, and we work with obstetricians a lot. and our obstetricians asked a question, how many extremely low birth weight babies, that is babies less than 1 kilo, how many babies do you admit every month and how many of them survive? Simple question. So my resident went home and prepared this slide. What do you think? Very hard to read. You can make sense of it if you spend enough time. It will take me maybe 5 minutes to convey the whole message. It is accurate. The content is perfect. There is nothing wrong with the science here. This person has painstakingly found the data, organized the data. I have changed the numbers a little for confidentiality, but it's a real slide. And this is how it actually looked. Do you think the obstetricians interested in 4 and 6 and 5 and by knowing whether 50.6% survived or 49.3% survived? Do you think they are interested in that? What do they want to know? What percentage of people roughly survive? Right? They want to know whether 1/3 of these babies will survive, half of these babies will survive, 2/3 of these babies will survive. They are not interested in the minutiae like 50.7% or 33% survived. They want to know on average, what is the chance that if I deliver a baby less than 1 kilo, what is the chance that baby will go home? That's all they need to know. That's their interest. And they also would like to get a rough sense of how many of these babies come to the hospital every day. So we replaced this slide. This is being presented next month. So we replaced this slide. This is called a stacked bar chart. The traditional teaching is that a picture is worth 1,000 words. I don't know about 1,000 words, but maybe 500 at least. Do you say? Agree? Maybe a few hundred words at least. Yeah. And math, at one glance the obstetrician gets the sense that, oh, this is about half blue and half gray. And they know that blue is alive and gray is expired. So they get the visual impression that this is about 50% survival. I don't have to tell them that this is 50% survival. This is what they need to know. And if they really want to add things, it's simple math, single digit addition. Shouldn't be a problem to most doctors. Right? What do you think? Most of us are pretty good at single digit addition. Somewhat mathematically challenged, but I think we can manage this, adding single digit numbers. Anyway, this is what you can do to change your slides. You can still have the same content, but you can present it better. But for that you need to step back a bit from your data. You need to go back to that slide and you need to think about what did the obstetrician really ask for? What do they want to know? They want to know approximately what percentage of these babies go home. That's the key message from the slide that you should have. Approximately how many babies are born every month. So you have to really filter out the message that you're trying to convey through the slide. Once you do that, it becomes clear how you want to present it. But you have to step back, think about it for a moment instead of just starting typing as soon as you open a slide. So it takes some thinking. The second part is about how we speak and how we communicate. So accent is a problem. Most of us have very strong accents. And some of us are a bit bothered by that also when we present. But I would say never mind the accent. It's not going to go away. I was born in Kerala, so it's like a congenital affliction. The accent is never going to go away. So, and one of the low points of my life was when I went abroad. I was talking to this white consultant for some time in English, not a word of anything else, in plain English, and he asked me after some time if I'm from Kerala. So that's how bad it is, right? The accent is not going to go away. Better learn to live with it and get over it. If you're bothered by it, don't be. Everybody has an accent and it's fine. Ideally, a neutral accent is best, but if you can work on it. If you have too strong an accent, that might distract people from what you're trying to say. The other thing we can do, that anybody can do to speak better, is to enunciate. So enunciate just means you speak every syllable clearly, every word and every syllable of every word. And this is tougher than you think. You might think that it's easy to enunciate, but we, in general, as a population, I can tell you that we speak very fast. We speak very fast, and in our languages, often the syllables run into each other, and they are not very distinct. We combine syllables, they run into each other. So, and that's the way we speak English, and it's very difficult for people sometimes to follow what we are saying. But if you slow down a bit, you can enunciate each syllable of each word, literally. But this takes some conscious effort, and this makes your speaking much better. You can try tongue twisters. This is part of practice, and many people do this. Serious speakers, like for instance news readers, who have to speak for a living and who have to speak clearly for a living, weather forecasters, newscasters, they have to speak very clearly, right? And they practice on it. It's because that's what they do for a living. They practice repeatedly until they get it clear. The enunciation part has to be clear. I just put in a couple of examples there, but even our own presentations, if you rehearse, then it gets much better over time. There is something called a mirror session where you can actually look at a mirror and speak and watch how you speak. And you will find very often that the way your mouth moves, with the way your jaw moves, the way your lips move, there is something asymmetric about them or unusual about them, and those are things that may distract people and that you can correct, and this will also help you to enunciate better. You are looking at yourself. Another way is to just record this and play it back. You can use a mobile phone to record it. The first time I had my own talk recorded, I didn't record it, it was being recorded like this, and I had a chance to watch it. I was shocked at how bad it sounded. I was shocked. It was pretty bad. It's probably pretty bad right now also, but it's better. You should have listened to that one. And people do pre-speech exercises. I'm not doing a demo of that right now, but if you Google it, you will find plenty of YouTube videos on pre-speech exercises. But the one thing we all can do starting right away is to slow down. Take your time. Speak each word clearly, enunciate each syllable clearly. Oh, I have a video, I think. Do we have the audio? No, it was working. We tested it some time ago, but I think he has switched off the audio. Or is there a problem with, can I?
Around the rocks, the rugged rascal ran.
Very good.
Oh, hi, Don.
Shall I continue?
Yeah, go ahead. Don't mind me.
Now, sinful Caesar sipped his snifter, seized his knees, and sneezed.
Sinful Caesar snipped his snifter.
Sipped his snifter.
Sipped his snifter. Oh, thank you. Sinful Caesar sipped his snifter, seized his knees, and sneezed.
Marvelous.
Marvelous.
Oh, here is a good one. Chester chooses chestnuts, cheddar cheese with chewy chives. He chews them and he chooses them. He chooses them and he chews them. Those chestnuts, cheddar cheese and chives in cheery, charming chunks.
Oh, wonderful. Do another one.
Oh, thank you. Moses supposes his toes are roses, but Moses supposes erroneously. Moses, he knows his toes aren't roses, as Moses supposes his toes to be.
So that's from Singing in the Rain. Many of you might have seen it, not all of you. He's a voice coach. So there are such things. I don't know if I would hire a voice coach. That would be going too far, but we can definitely work on enunciating better. And the other thing we can do, and a lot of us get this very wrong, is we use a lot of fillers. Like, exactly that, right? I use right a lot. If you record yourself and listen to it, you'll be surprised at how many of these
fillers we use. I once taught PowerPoint graphics. This was a few years ago. I've taught it here, I've taught it in another online
class. And they sent me a recording after. So about half the talk was just and ah. And the rest of the talk was about PowerPoint graphics. So we use a lot of fillers. The best way to get rid of this is to listen to yourself. Just talk, just the audio. You don't need to record the video also. Just record the audio of your talk and listen back to it. And it gives you a third party
view of what you were speaking about. And you will be surprised at how many fillers we use. This you can completely cut out. It takes time from your presentation. It delays your presentation. It distracts the audience.
So cut out the fillers, right? Record yourself, listen to it. This is very hard, this takes time, and I still can't get rid of all the fillers, but you can get better at this. And finally, there is body language. This is something very important. If you have to classify communication as verbal and non-verbal, some people would say the majority of communication is non-verbal. Even when you are talking to someone, you convey a lot of things without your realizing it, non-verbally. So body language counts a lot when you are doing an oral presentation.
You might be on a stage behind the podium, but still it matters what you do with your hands,
with your body, the way you stand, the way you look at audience, the way you look at the people in the front rows or behind you. That matters a lot. So that's your body language, and that actually connects to people or disconnects you from people entirely depending on what you do.
In general, we teach this: stand, relaxed, not too tense, not behind the podium, don't lean on the podium. Never lean on the podium. That's terrible. But also don't hunch. Don't be too tense, your shoulders tight and all that. People actually do stretches before they go on stage.
People might ask you whether you are planning to run on the stage or talk if you do too many stretches
before you go on the stage. But you can definitely loosen up your shoulders, neck before you go on stage for a major talk. Right? You should be trying that. In the backstage, nobody cares what you do in the backstage. Right? So you can stretch, relax, do some exercises, clear your throat before you go on stage to talk. In most places that should be possible. Even here that should be possible if you are maybe sitting there, you can do that before you go on stage and talk. Right? Similarly, crossing arms, playing with something on the podium, handling the mic repeatedly, making repetitive movements.
That's generally considered a no-no. You cannot do that. And crossing your arms is also a no. And then there is this concept of grounding and gesturing. So gestures are an important part of your conversation, and most of us use our hands extensively while talking. Some of us don't move at all. We stand very stiffly and talk. I'm not saying that you should use your hands while talking, but if you use it, you should use it in very limited and specific ways. You can't flail them around. In general, there is the concept of a box within which you move. So the upper body, for instance, this area would be the box, and the gestures would be limited to this. If you move well beyond that, it sounds weird to people, but if you move too less also, it looks weird to people. So you do a lot of things with your hands. So some of them are listing, emphasis, and proportions. Listing is what we do when we talk about, let's say, numbers. I might say lists, proportions, emphasis, right? So I'm listing it out. I have 3 things on my list, and I'm using my fingers to list it out. I might use emphasis, and you see this all the time. You see parents talking to their children with pointing fingers. So you emphasize because they want to get the message across to the child, and you use that while speaking also. But you may use a more open gesture like this is important. You may not exactly point fingers at people, but you may use an open hand gesture to emphasize things. And you often use proportions also. Some time ago, I told you that obstetricians are interested in knowing if 1/3 of the children died, or half the children, or 2/3. So you are showing the proportions visually. People may not realize it, but they'll still get the message. Subconsciously, they'll follow what you are saying because you are demonstrating it with your hand. So this is about proportions. And that part is very important. Some of us will need to work on it. It doesn't come naturally to us. Most of us, when we start off talking on stage, we would like to just hide behind the podium and speak from the safety of that place. But I think at some point you will have to speak like this. Open stage, no podium to people. At that time all this becomes important, right? This all comes with practice. It doesn't come overnight. So don't worry about it if we are doing something right, something wrong right now. It does not matter. It will improve with time. Storytelling is very important to us. I think humanity, civilization kind of had it from the beginning. So human beings are said to be natural storytellers. Civilization always had people sitting around fires telling stories to each other, gossiping about what was happening in the neighboring village or whatever, or what threats they were facing, discussing other things. So storytelling comes to us naturally. And this is part of the trick to getting your message across. And you can work on it too. You have specific techniques that I'm not going to go into too much, but one technique, for example, is the hook. You need to generate that interest at the beginning about what you are going to talk about. This may be in the form of a personal anecdote, talking about yourself, or talking about something that the audience can relate to. I had a reason to talk to students about antibiotic resistance recently, and this is one of the research papers that came out last year, showing the global burden of antimicrobial resistance. You know, it's a problem everywhere. Many more people are dying every year due to antimicrobial resistance and antibiotics being ineffective. People are dying due to infections that we could have cured a few years ago. Now we are not able to do that. And babies are dying too in neonatology. It's a big problem. We had contributed a tiny amount of data to this. But this is a 10-page paper with appendices and all that. Do you think everyone will read this? The general public is never going to read this. Who will read this? Even our students, our trainees in neonatology don't read this. Not all of them. At least 2 or 3 that I asked today hadn't read it. Today morning we had a discussion about this and I was asking them. They hadn't read it. They had read the abstract, bits of the abstract. So I don't know what they read, but the message doesn't get across to people. This is the problem. So if you had to pick a number from this, that would make a lot of difference. That's the hook that you start with. If you have to talk about this paper, it's boring. It's dry science. It's not interesting to people. But what's the key message from this paper? This paper, what it actually found is that around 1.27 million people die every year due to antimicrobial resistance. These are not just people dying from resistant bugs. This is due to antimicrobial resistance. Around 5 million people die every year with infections due to resistant bacteria. Out of that, at least 1.27 million we could have prevented if they were not antibiotic resistant. That's what we are trying to say. So the hook there is to start with a number that people can relate to. For instance, there was a train wreck in Greece 2 days ago. About 38 people died. It's in the front page of BBC, CNN, everything. You think this 1 million is anywhere in the headlines? You won't see it. 1 million people dying every year, 1.27 million people dying every year. And this is a number that's increasing. This was 2019 estimate. It will be much worse in 2022. But why isn't it front page news? 38 people dying is front page news. 1 million people dying is not front page news. That's because the numbers don't make much sense to people if it's out of context. If 5 people die in my village that I know, it makes a lot of difference to me. Yes or no? From your place, if it's 5 people you know, or 1 person you know, it makes a lot of difference to me. And that's how people react. So you need to communicate that part. You need to tell them that if 38 people die, it's front page news. But 1 million people dying every year is not. Right? This people can relate with. That makes it into a story. If you are starting with that, that makes it interesting to people, that people can relate with the magnitude of the problem. So you are comparing and contrasting with something else that has affected people to convey the magnitude of the problem. Yes? So I would start with that. And this is probably the most important part. The second most important part is that you have to be interested in what you're talking about. This makes a lot of difference. You don't have to work too hard if you like what you're talking about, right? Your sincerity will show. This will be naturally communicated to people. You don't have to do much rehearsing on this one. Someone once said that sincerity is the most important part. Once you fake it, everything else is fine. I'm kidding. Don't fake it. You have to be sincere about what you're talking. So you have to have an interest in the topic, and people will naturally follow. And most important probably is learn, listen to others, watch others, and learn from that. That is the best part. So far, I would say that the best teacher I've had is YouTube and other people about presenting skills. Mostly people. You can watch good presenters, and you can always learn something from them. At least one point. None of them are going to be perfect. They all make mistakes, but you can always learn something new from them. These are movies by, you probably know him, Quentin Tarantino. I think the students will definitely know. So when he was asked if he went to film school, he said, no, I went to films. I watched films and learned how to make films. I didn't go to film school and learn how to make films. And this is what I'm talking about. You don't have to go to school to learn how to talk. You just have to listen to people talking. They are teaching you. They are your teachers. Even if the content is not of interest to you, the way they are speaking is something you can learn. Right? Agreed? I have a list of talks that you can listen to. Some of them are not available in video, but some of them are available in audio. All of them are available as audio, like Swami Vivekananda's talk and I think even the Freedom or Death talk. They're only available as audio on YouTube or other sites. But great talks to listen to, and it's excellent how they manage to communicate sometimes very important messages. Emmeline Pankhurst, for instance, was a suffragette. She was, that Freedom or Death speech was about the right for women to vote in England. She was English and she made the speech in US while she was out of jail. She was put in jail in the beginning of the last century, not very long ago. She was put in jail because she was advocating for the right for women to vote in England, just 1913, 1914, in that time. And you know the other people. The first one, if you haven't heard it, you should definitely watch on YouTube. The last lecture. It's literally his last lecture, and he knew it too, but you should watch it. All of them are imperfect. If you listen to Winston Churchill, who is said to be one of the greatest speakers of all time, he speaks terribly. He speaks like he has two pebbles in his mouth or something. It doesn't sound even very clear. But the intensity of speaking is very different. And you can see how good he is at this, how skilled he is at it. So you should listen to it just to understand that imperfect people can give great speeches.
So to conclude, I would say content is important, but the other half of it is communication. So you have to work on both, how to present content very well and how to communicate very well. And that together is oral presentation. This is content and communication. Work on both and you have it down.
Right, thank you.
Indeed, it was a very thought-provoking and very informative presentation actually. Like what you have, you were telling like, the way the others present, we should try to get ourselves we'll get an individuality out of that. But I was thinking like that, but seeing your presentation, I thought that you have made it very simple to do a oral presentation out of all the tips, 10 to 11 tips which you have given. Thank you so much for your presentation. Now the session is open for discussion. Any queries from the audience?
Very nice talk, Nishad. We really
Thank you.
enjoyed it. Two comments or observations. You were talking about movements and gestures.
I think one of the things we picked up from COVID when we were on Zoom, when you watch yourself on Zoom, you will kind of know all these things. So people who have the tendency to keep your Zoom video on and see what you're doing, even little bit slouching, little bit not looking into the camera, all that made a lot of difference. So this is a very good tool to see how you present yourself there. One way it is much more taxing because fatigue sets in very fast. Like you can't unwind when you look at it, but it's good for watching this. The second thing is the PowerPoint, recent PowerPoint versions have come up with a tool where you can actually do a trial presentation. It gives a very nice analytics. It tells you how many hours and meaningless words you use. It even tells you that you have used this word so many times. And that is very helpful for PGs or if you are going to speak. And one trick which works to I found very often is you need to rehearse your slides without slides. You need to look at your slides. I usually do this trick when I'm sleeping or when I'm trying to get up. I know the sequence of slides and how I'm going to connect one slide to the next. So that way,
in your mind.
So it becomes much easier if you can connect it in your mind, then delivering the PowerPoint becomes very easy. Otherwise, if power goes, you have no points to make. So that is
Good point. PowerPoint depends on I think you had a very nice presentation. I think you made the presentation easy, as you rightly said. I think something like practice. You have to practice, you have to observe, then you have to learn. Yeah, that one. Yeah, exactly. Don't miss any chance you get to present. You might be afraid, but don't miss a chance. I'm surprised at how much better media students are in this than when I used to be a media student. I was telling madam that we are having presentations now, and people are fighting to be chairpersons. In our days, it would be
like someone would be pushing us on stage and we would still be reluctant to go
on stage. But now people are fighting to be chairpersons, which is a good thing. But you shouldn't miss any chance to talk. It gets better with time. It definitely gets better. When you first start off pretty bad, so it can only get better from there. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nishad, for the advice to our speakers. Sir, move on. Sit.